Hello, Ryan.
Hello, José Mª.
I'm getting vaccinated next week.
Congratulations. Is that what we say now when someone gets vaccinated?
Thank you very much. It is an important event for my life and for the lives of those who've been lucky enough to reach this point. Yes. Thank you very much, pal.
So you decided against taking Rogan's advice. I know you saw it on the news.
Well, Rogan's advice not to get vaccinated was for young people.
Exactly.
So it is not for me. I lost that condition some years ago.
Yeah, maybe a few months or a few years ago.
Speaking about the virus, do you think it really was a black swan?
Black swan events, no, something unexpected or like a major disaster that couldn't have been predicted. I know you're going to say that it isn't a black swan event, but I think hypothetically we can imagine many events that could happen, or many disasters, but still this was very hard to predict.
Well, it is not an easy question, and it is not an easy answer. Perhaps we could say that a black swan would be if people coming from outer space reached Earth today. For me, that's a real black swan. But in the case
of... We're not going that far. We're not going...
No, but to know, first of all, what a black swan is, we must go and at least know, reading the book, Nicholas Taleb, The Black Swan. And his book is about this topic and about tail events. Those events that tail events. There is a small possibility for them to happen, but we must be aware and we must not to react. We must be prepared previously. Just in case this happened, we could take some measures.
But can I say, and in a practical sense, there's probably, we can think right now of 100 events that have a possibility of happening, but practically speaking, it's extremely difficult to prepare for all of them equally. We have to set some type of priorities, and that's not including the problems we have right now that we have to deal with.
As the technique science advances, we can know more things and we can be prepared previously. We can foresee those events, but we must put that in relation with things that really cannot be conceived. So the question is, could really happen what happened about the virus last year? And I mean, even Taleb, for him, the virus was not a black swan, because he thought in our state of science development, not only we should have known, we knew this was something more than possible, not probable, but more than possible. And for him, and it is something relevant, this was not a black swan event.
And even fair, we have Gates, no? Yeah. Bill Gates, he predicted it, but he did say 2008?
15.
Well,
almost. Yes.
Almost, yeah.
There is a TED talk.
Yeah.
You can watch it. And 5 years ago,
I'm going to stop predicting dates because I've been wrong every time. Maybe I'll say decade or century. In the 21st century, I think he predicted.
No, yes, he said that. And even in his last book about climate change, perhaps we could go back to that topic. he said, or he mentions that speech given 5 years ago, in which he said we should be aware, and he was thinking about Ebola. Do you remember that virus in Africa? And in Spain, we had one case, I think, 2 cases, I mean, one in Spain, and a second case for that was the case of a Spanish person that was working in Africa, and he was taken to Spain, to our hospitals. But we only had 2 cases because Ebola is not transmitted through the air. So the chances for this virus to spread all over the world are not so evident. And so I think we haven't reached a conclusion. And well, even I want to add, there's a public report coming from United Nations. It was released in the field of health. A new organization was created some years ago, precisely due to the Ebola pandemic or epidemic. And they said in this paper, this report, that in the last months of 2019, we were facing a real risk to suffer a worldwide epidemic. I mean, a pandemic.
Yeah.
It is a public document.
I didn't know.
Black Swan. Well, yes. I don't know if it was a black swan or someone failed. Our system failed. Our prevention system failed, and it is hard to say, but perhaps we could have avoided this in part, at least. I don't know.
And then it's another conversation altogether. One thing is preparing for it, and then another thing is reacting to it after. And well, we won't even have time to get into that.
Well, prevention is
better than the cure.
Of course it is. And if there is something tricky as well here, it is as in climate change combat. If you do things properly, those damages don't happen.
Yeah.
And if they don't happen, someone could say, no, you were wrong. This didn't happen. No, but this didn't happen because we worked for it not to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and it can be a bit of, how would you say, like a paradox, no? You say, this is going to happen, so we prepare for it. It doesn't happen. And then people then may not trust you then in the future to deal with a similar situation because you said that you predicted it and it didn't happen, but really you did the right thing. You prepared for it well and you avoided what could have been a catastrophe.
Yes, that's a paradox. That's so we are speaking about the black swan. But in the last months, even before the pandemic, a different but close expression started to be used, and it is the green swan. If you have had some difficulties to define a black swan, will you have these difficulties to explain what a green swan is?
Well, I thought I explained the black swan pretty well, to tell you the truth, but the green swan then is relating to climate change. That this is.
Yes, I said that. Yes, I said something about this before. Yes, it is about climate change, a complex topic as well. In the Stern report about climate change, you remember last week, you defined perfectly what a market failure is. And this report, the Stern report, they describe climate change as the biggest market failure in history, ever, always. So it is very important, although, as we said before, as the negative results of climate change will be evident. Not now. Now some of them are evident, but the big part will be evident in the future within 15, 30, 50, 100 years. There is not an incentive for us to think about this market failure, this scientific problem we have, and as we don't reflect on this topic, we don't take measures, thinking first that people living in the future will have to fix this mess, and second, that our scientific development will give us weapons to fight effectively against climate change. But I think both ideas are wrong.
Okay, please explain why.
Well, first of all, what do you think about climate change? I mean, young people like you. Do you think this is a real risk for your lives, for our lives, for our way of living?
Yes, well, I'm going to go with what Elon Musk says. I'll trust him in this matter. And he says it's one of the, I think he says, the dumbest experiments that has ever been conducted in human history. He says that something has to be done sooner rather than later. So I'll have to trust him on this one and not even go with what I think myself. So that's what I believe, but no doubt, I think it's a hot topic now for many young people. A lot of young people getting involved in this conversation, and most.
When you go out with your friends and you are drinking beer, you say, "I read something awful, horrendous about climate change, and I think we must do something." Has this ever happened?
I don't think this has ever happened, not in my circle of friends, but a lot of young people do talk about climate change, of course.
Yes.
Well, you look on the internet and plenty of people, they'll post things on social networks, on Facebook and on Instagram talking about it. So it's definitely part of the, what do you say, the public conversation, you could say.
I know that in my professional life, this is an important topic, and not only in Spain. In my relations with people, I will not say from all over the world, but at least from all over the corners of Europe. And I know people from all over the world is aware about this. And well, I know that
are taking this situation very seriously, right? China in recent years have done a lot to combat against climate change.
Yes.
So that's
China,
for me that it's something serious.
Now they are the big polluters, because now they are developing as we did 100 years ago. And they are 1.5 billion people, more or less. So the issue of not only carbon and all sort of fumes, call it as you want, I mean, that produce this effect, they are evident. But now we, of course, this is a controversial topic. Can we demand China to cut their emissions in the same way we are cutting ours in Europe within the year 2050? We should be carbon neutral. It is not easy.
I mean, we need to realize that this thing can't be done overnight. If we were to cut it right now, it would do more harm than good, because there'd be no transportation, there wouldn't be...
This is called the transition risk.
Yeah.
There is that transition from our form of doing things to a different one. And this process will offer opportunities, but as well, we will have to run risks and costs, because this transition is not for free.
Of course not.
It must be financed, and governments don't have money enough. So that's the reason why they ask for the help of the private financial sector. And this is the phenomenon of the sustainable finance. And yes, we must, our aim is to put less carbon in the air than that amount that we take out. And we have 30 years for that. Of course, we will always issue carbon to the atmosphere. Sure this something we cannot think about issuing zero carbon to the atmosphere, to the air.
Well, obviously also cows, no, when they they fart, no, is that what they put into the air as well? And so
methane, the gas.
Yeah.
And yes, because this greenhouse effect is produced not only by carbon, but by several sorts of gases. And well, there is a different part, because you realize we speak about climate change, how the average temperature is increasing all over the world. We have as well the environmental degradation. It is not exactly the same, but of course, both topics have a lot of points in common. But if you realize, we see how a new idea is linked to this, and it is about inequality. And about the phrase is not to leave vulnerable people behind. And there is an important part of about equality, and we spoke about equality, the social contract. And so we have two topics: climate change. We must be worried about this itself, plus inequalities. But for me, the question is, what inequalities? All the inequalities we see in the world, or inequalities that have something to do with climate change? And we cannot separate. I mean, in the end, these inequalities, some will be a part of climate change, some will be structural, some will depend on the bad choices taken by people. But what we cannot do is, if we want to pay attention, if we want to take seriously the fight against inequality, saying I will make a difference between inequality coming from climate change and inequality coming from the way our lives are organized and work.
Good to separate the two, because oftentimes we conflate all types of inequality into the same category, but of course it's, as you said, it's not that simple.
So you find you have a big trouble, climate change, but of course you have to add the social issue or the social topic, and then you don't have two problems. You have one and extremely complex to solve, and as well fighting against time, because if we believe scientists, they say that we are close to reach a no return point.
Yeah, a point of no return.
That's it. Thank you, Pan. So you see,
So I see what.
I say this is a deep reflection for you. I see you are thinking.
No, of course I'm listening. I'm trying to. It's complex information, and I'm trying to take it in at the same time. I'm listening to it, and at the same time trying to.
Once we finish, I want you to phone Greta Thunberg, and I want you to join a group to fight. Yes, yes. I want you young people. She is more or less your age, and I want you young people to come together and work together.
Okay,
because
we really that helps.
No, we really need a different point of view. The point of view of the people that will take the important decisions in the future.
Yes, but this needs to be handled by experts in a rational way.
Well, of course, the big measures, the big ideas, yes, but don't forget that each one of us can do
responsibility. Yeah, no doubt. Of course.
By the way, tomorrow is the day of the environment.
Oh, fantastic.
So it seems we have chosen this issue, but we haven't. But tomorrow is the worldwide day of environment. So it's a good day to reflect and to think about all this.
Certainly is.
Well, next week we will speak about something interesting, but I still don't know about what.
Okay, so we have a surprise for next week.